agree. Right, Mr. Joe Genier, it's a pleasure as always to see you here with us, and thank you for doing this interview for UCLA. They're going to be very happy to see this, and I'm sure that the students will learn a lot about what you have to share with us today.
Oh, well, let us hope.
Oh yeah, I know. You and I have worked together a long, long, long time, which is when I just
Yeah.
moved from Germany to Los Angeles, and we worked on a little movie called Timeshare, which was an interesting endeavor itself, which is some things
Yes, it
might
was.
something might even apply. And I share this actually with my students in the class where I talk about working with the bond company for the first time, not understanding the needs of what they wanted, not understanding that they just really want to keep us on track. I just felt totally annoyed. So I shared all these things. I
Right.
shared that we had a director who, like me, was inexperienced, so it was really the blind leading the blind, and what that does to a project. So I always tell my students, first time directors only do it when you know what you're doing. Don't do what I do.
Right.
Yeah,
She was very special.
she was very special indeed.
Had special
So,
qualities.
yeah. And a lot of these things happen to students in our classes. They have the same experience when they start with their new projects, which is why some of the things we talk or I talk to them about is especially things that go wrong. And I have a whole list of things that went wrong over the 45 projects that I produced after that. And there's always
Sure.
new things that can go wrong, right? And you know this because you've done a lot of amazing things. Speaking about you, first question was
Yes.
that I had written down here for you. What inspired you to work in the industry, and what are some of your more favorite and more interesting projects? First of
Okay.
all, what do you
Well,
do? Let's start there. Jesus.
I'm okay, what do I do? I'm a glorified babysitter and a on set and a firefighter who puts out the first fire that's coming forward. So that's pretty much what a producer does after the project gets up and running. You're just taking whatever the next problem is and trying to solve it. So that's what I would say, and I think everybody understands what that is. But I'm a producer. I work in film and television here in lovely Hollywood, and well, mostly I've been in a lot of Atlanta lately because of tax credits, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with going after that soft money. But been shooting, for many moons, and with you, like way back when. So that was fun. That was there were a lot of funny moments on that project that I remember. In terms of little fires popping up here and there, but that was a lovely endeavor. But I work in TV and films. I started out as as an assistant to a producer. I worked at a company that was fairly prolific with for Roger Corman, kind of the B movie king, who's made hundreds, if not thousands, of movies. But that was my film school, and I worked down there in whatever capacity for whoever did not show up that day to work. So whether that was craft service or whether that was the boom operator or a juicer or a grip or an AD, that was my kind of training on the floor. Um, so that's led into a UPM dome because I kind of understood each of the positions, each of the categories, because in some capacity I work them, and then line producing, and then producing, and actually writing and directing. So it's trying to hit all of it now. So it's been going pretty well.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Writing and directing also. See, that's
Yeah.
two things. I mean, writing I do, but directing is one of the things I will never touch. It's too detail crazy for me. And that's even more of a
it's
big
another level of it's another level of firefighting, because not only are you trying to, because you never take off your producer hat, right?
right.
So not only are you seeing the little fires on the side and trying to ignore them because there's people there to deal with them, but you're trying to focus on what's in front of the camera too. So it's been fun actually. Haven't done it since just before COVID, but looking forward to a couple projects coming up for that.
Great. Can you share some of the interesting or more difficult projects that you've worked on, and why you thought they were difficult?
Sure. Well, always when you're shooting internationally, there's a level of it, at the base of it, when you're on the ground, all filming is kind of the same. And where are we parking the trucks, and can we get this location, and we need this personnel for that scene there. But when you're shooting internationally, you're usually dealing sometimes with some co-production treaties between countries, sometimes with tax incentives, international tax incentives, and you got a lot of banking to deal with. And that usually you really have to have your prep time for that, just for the paper, as you know,
Yeah.
just for the paperwork. It's a somewhat daunting task at times, and especially if you have to ship prior. I know my company was working on a film in South Africa, and it was with modified vehicles, futuristic, dystopian kind of thing, and a lot of them had to be sourced in the US and modified here, some modified here, but shipped over to South Africa. And then you have to know the shipping routes, and um, you know, and when we filmed in the Bahamas, you have to know when the tides are coming in and the tides are going out. And just those commuter planes from Miami to the Bahamas, it was there's some complications with international filming. I think those are the most daunting on a logistics level.
Yeah.
Not insurmountable at all. It's just it's all prep. So if you
So
have a sufficient amount of time, those are usually the projects that are a little more you got to bite off a little more there.
right. So you basically, if you shoot internationally, you have to really think about preparing maybe a longer prep time or maybe a little
Longer prep
pre-prep to
time.
the prep time so you can deal with all the stuff that you need to deal with, like
Yeah, I
work.
mean we have a project that'll probably go in South Africa, start shooting in September
Mm-hmm.
of next year, and we have a scout we're supposed to leave on January 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
And we've already been interviewing crew for that. So it's a long lead time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, depending on the show.
Yeah, I mean, I shot there. I did a movie with Halle Berry there, and I couldn't have done it without the co-producer that I had on site. We did a deal with a
Mm,
co-producer who then dealt with doing all the crewing and stuff, so I didn't
yep.
go too deep into that. But I could have never done this by myself, honestly. It
Yeah,
was early.
it's hard. We're looking at a company as well. They've been helping us set up the scout, and hopefully we'll carry through.
That's good.
So it's knock on wood. Hopefully that all go well, and international travel will
We
stay
will.
open.
Yes. Well, good luck with
Yeah.
that.
Thank you.
So today it's all about money. I mean, I deal a lot with the fact that when I produce a movie or a TV show, it doesn't really matter. I always have to look at how do I get this lower budgeted? How do I make it more
Sure.
inexpensive? And that's what I want to focus on a little bit with you because it's really a subject matter we're all dealing with today in the not just past pandemic world, but also the past Netflix coming in and disrupting everything and the revenue model changing world. So that's
Yeah.
why lowering your costs is so essential for us to be able to even get a project made. So I
Sure.
wanted to hear your thoughts on, because of this competitive marketplace, what areas you have found, on a project are difficult and expensive to shoot when you look at a script, for example, for film and television.
Well, I'd say, um, you. Sorry, I'm thinking about all the things that as you read a script, you're going through, and you're like, oh boy, that's good.
Right.
That's going to be,
Next.
stuff. We're shooting in a stadium, or we're water work. Water is a big one. Anytime, I was just breaking down a script the other day, and they were on a yacht, and so I'm thinking, where, it's set in Miami, we're going to shoot in Atlanta, there's no yachts in Atlanta. So, it's not. So okay, now I need to set up a separate unit to go to like a Miami or the coast somewhere. Now I need a big ass yacht. And then they had a fire on the yacht, then they had a fight on the yacht, and they're breaking through, and I'm like, so now I can't actually use a yacht because those yacht owners do not let you break stuff on their ship boat. So now I have to build the interior of the cabin, that they're fighting in, and then they dive off the yacht at the end into the water. So every time, sorry, my
Your
dog is
dog. I love it. We want to see it
bark.
in the end. I definitely
Uh,
need it on camera.
All right, hold on one second. One
Yeah.
second.
I know the feeling. I have three dogs here right now.
We'll see if you understood that.
Mm.
I try to explain them on an interview and recording, but I don't know if it went through.
See.
But anyway,
Yeah.
I was thinking, and now with water work and water safety, I always get nervous around the water because it's so unpredictable. Not just when you're offshore, but even when you're working with a boat, moored in the dock. They have to go in the water. So depending on what they're jumping in, you have to test the water. You need safety divers, you need safety boat, you need a safety camera crew on the side, you need a camera platform on the side, you need Coast Guard informed, you need, it's a trickle down of boom, 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 boom. So I'm like, first thing I'm probably going to do is tell them, okay, they can't jump into the water. Let's just, it's actually easier if they jumped onto the dock to avoid being captured. So those are kind of the things I get nervous about. And just bigger scenes with a lot of extras, always car chases through the city. Car chases through the city is you know, if, we have a lot of advantages with CGI now. We did a motorcycle chase through a city once. This is years back before things like the volume were and LED screens were available. And you need a motorcycle, you need a motorcycle on a gimbal, you need a bunch of special effects guys to do all that. You have to time your plate shot with it. So it's always usually a mixture of practical and CGI at that point. But there, you need a stage for all that green. You need a stage for the gimbal. You start marking off all the things you need for something like, oh, a car chase, that'll be cool. Yeah, it'll be cool. But if you have to add practical, you have to add people diving out of the way. So now you don't have just, and when I see it in, the Italian Job or the Marvel movies or, Black Widow's bike chase or the always love it in the James Bond stuff. It's always, they just do a fantastic job. And I'm always thinking to myself, as it's hard to separate when you're watching something like that and you're like, okay, so you have to pay for those extras and all those extras are stunt people, so they're at a premium, and that guy's doing a major thing where he jumps off of the bridge, so now you have an adjustment on that guy going over. That kind of stunt work, water work, that always has its things that kind of throw up red flags when I'm reading a script, as well as kind of big extra scenes, sports scenes. We shot a gymnastics scene in the Olympics, and that's a bunch of CGI and a bunch of tiling work in stadiums, along with all the actors and the doubles for the gymnasts. Those are each project is unique in its complications, but those are some of the things that kind of make me a little nervous going in terms of big cost numbers.
So when you have a project where you have a chase scene, a water scene, and a gymnastic scene in a stadium, or is your first instinct to say, for example, well, we have to make decisions here. What can we keep? What can we lose? What suggestions would you make then to the director or the writer, for example, to say, okay, we're on a budget. If we do this, we have to do it this way, or we have to maybe figure out a different way to tell the story. How would you deal with that on a writer level, if you would change it?
Well, on a writer level, there's a couple things. So we're in we're in the writer I'm in a writer's room now for this sci-fi, not sci-fi, it's a set in the future. We don't like to say sci-fi, so I
Okay.
gotta be careful.
What is the
It's
new
set in
word
the
for that sci-fi then? Is
I
it just
you know I
futuristic?
don't know. I'm just trying to, because I keep getting the comment, we don't want it too sci-fi.
Okay, got
So
it.
I'm like, oh no, it's not sci-fi. It's
Not sci-fi. Not sci-fi.
blah blah. It's just set in the future and it has different technology.
Right.
Um, so in terms of what I would say to the writers, we're in the room now.
Right.
With television, there's a big thing for me just about how many scenes there are and how many sets there are. So when you have more scenes, you have to usually, um, even if one's in a hospital and one's in a bedroom and the sets are right next to each other, as soon as you're done with the hospital, you have to stop. You have to move all your equipment and crew over. You have to reset the lights in the bedroom, even if they're 10 feet away. So all that breakdown, move over, reestablish, get the cameras ready, rehearse, relight. That's usually 45 minutes between sets, if not longer. So, and very simple, just a simple move. But if you kept that bedroom scene or house scene in the hospital somehow, as long as it works creatively, you've saved 45 minutes. Because even like the makeup and hair team, Vanity's team, they set up their little pod around one of the monitors, but having them all pick up their bags, pick up their chairs, move the monitors, move over, it's a process. So you're losing time. So everything you kind of talk about during the day is about efficiencies of time, how to keep your time with cameras rolling on the material, not on the logistics of having to move here or shut down, jump into the trucks and go shoot this little thing, this distant thing that's a mile down the road. It's always with writers, as long as the story and creative is not compromised, that you ask, is there any way to condense the number of sets and the number of locations, so that we have more time with the material and less time with the logistics off screen. So that's like probably number one for me, especially in television, especially, going script to script. That's the biggest cost, I would say.
And then of course you want to avoid things like, I mean, how do you feel about shooting day for night, night for day, in those, if you think about cost?
I never like tenting anything, because for some reason, every time you say, okay, let's do the tent, your schedule from the days before lands you like in night. So you didn't have to tent in the first place, but you have like, 8 grips out there for 8 hours with a bunch of materials and a bunch of like duvetine and black solids covering everything up. And then you get there and you're like, well, in a half an hour, it's going to be night. So things like that, I don't like. Really, I like kind of looking at the story. When you're working with a producer, a director, or even a writer, there are things that are precious to them and things that are thematic, that if you really dive in and understand what's important to them and what's important, not just to them, but to the story themselves. I often say, I don't work for the studio. After I'm hired, I don't work for the studio. I don't work for the network. I don't necessarily even work for the showrunner or the director. I work for the show. So I work for this material. So as long as I'm making the best decisions for this material, usually everybody else will be happy.
Right.
So you got to think of the show itself, what makes the best show, and you're using your background and your experience in doing that. I'm not, there's definitely an arrogance to what I just said, but usually I find that you service the show, you service everyone, including the show. So when you're doing that, you're thinking, what is trying to be expressed with the material, or what is dear to the director's heart, or what is that vision for that the director's tried to convey. And if you kind of service that with your decisions, you usually win. And thus, when he says, oh, I have these 3 different scenes and it's supposed to add to the theme of blah blah blah, you can say, well, what if we just move these scenes into the morning, into the daylight exterior outside, and they can still be in this kind of location that adds to the theme. You can make suggestions like that. And usually, if they are also thinking, oh, I'm servicing this story, those things will work, where you can get out of a night scene and you can make creative suggestions from from the heart that's not just for logistics, but it serves logistics, because we're always dealing with the merging of art and commerce. So you're always like taking the finance and you're taking the creative and you're trying to make them sleep together in a lovely bed. And sometimes it's a little difficult, and sometimes people are challenged to do that. But at the end of the day, if you have a creative mind, you can kind of offer suggestions, and they won't be shot down, because they know you're working in service of the show, in service of the script and material.
It's a good point to, when we producers try to solve solutions in a creative fashion, that we get creative and think about what is the best way to
Yeah,
tell that story. I think that's actually a very good point. Let's talk about casting a little bit, because those obviously are major costs.
sure.
There are, of course, differences between
Yeah.
the main cast and the extras. So, what are some of the tricks of the trades, so to speak, you can share with me in order to keep the budget feasible?
Well, there's always, just speaking from efficiencies, and again, as long as your service material, sometimes there's characters you don't really need, or these two characters combined serve the same point, the same purpose. So you have a character. If you eliminate a character, you eliminate a lot of things. You eliminate the hour or 2 hours that makeup and hair are dealing with them. You eliminate a cast room. You eliminate the transpo and the driver and the stake bed that have to bring that cast room to set. You eliminate the flights. You eliminate the per diem. You eliminate the hotel. You eliminate the wardrobe that has to be bought. So there's a lot of not just one cast person. There's like a slew of costs associated with each of them. So one, I just make sure we're not redundant in our characters, that each one is serving its purpose. That's one. The other thing with casting, especially on like TV work,
Mm-hmm.
you can often see, everybody always likes to go out all episodes produced with cast. It's easy, you get you pay them X amount per episode, and you're like, that's the deal. Agents love it because their talent is booked for a show. But sometimes you can make deals for 6 out of 10, or 7 out of 13. You don't have to pay the full thing, because that character, I'm not talking about the leads, I'm not talking about like
Yes.
a star, I'm just talking about supporting characters. You can make better deals, and because they're not going to be used, especially when you get everything written up top before you go into prep for a lot of the casting. You you can see like a 7 out of 13 deal is going to be the best, or 5 out of 10. Sometimes I made deals like I'm guaranteeing you 2 out of 10, just so you can lock that person in. You can use them when you need them for X amount of episodes. But I think that's the best thing for it's funny, when before we jumped on, we're dealing with we're trying to cast for a show, and the actors is tying tying themselves to other actors, and it's a game in a lot of ways, and it's just a little psychology here and there. So it's always interesting when you're going through negotiations and casting. And if is the best position to be in is the one where you're willing to walk away.
Yeah.
Best position to be in, it's always the power position, and usually the people negotiating know it. And if they don't know it, make it known. As long as you can stomach it, make it known, then negotiations go much easier.
Exactly. No, I had one situation where it worked the positive way, where I did a movie with Jason Statham, and then he liked the material so much, so he invited to have um, Mickey Rourke in there. So was
Oh
added
wow.
to the cast, and then we had 50 Cent that was added to the cast. So we added all these people. And I was like, guys, I can't afford this. With A, in New York, and B, you're all like major actors. How am I gonna pay you all? And then they decide, oh, we all want to do it for the same fee. It's fun. We want to live at the Soho House. We want the penthouse. If you can arrange for all these things, and Soho was great enough to work with us anyway, and
Right.
that was a cost and effect, like what they wanted in perks, in combination with saving money for their fees, for their salaries, their regular salaries, and elevating the value of the movie by having all these
Sure.
people in the movie was great. So it goes sometimes the other way around when they demand on, I want this person in and I want that person in. And I remember when I was doing Dark Tide with Halle Berry, she had, for her love interest, she had Olivier Martinez already in mind. So I didn't even have to look for anyone. I'm like, okay, fine.
Sure.
I'm going to call up the agency if they want to work with you, and then we'll just do it. And guess what? They married and have a child. So there's that. So you sometimes
Right.
have to be matchmaker. But I think you're right. You have to be able to say no, and you have to be okay to say no. And I
Sure.
find that conversation often to be the case when you deal with agents who want a lot of perks. So maybe you can talk about what main actors usually ask for and where you should say no.
They ask for a lot of stuff. And my sensibilities are fairly grounded. I come from a middle class background. I worked at a hamburger hot dog stand in the summer for my first job. So when I hear some of these things, I'm just like, what? I don't, it's literally like I have to check myself so I'm not looking dumbfounded in a meeting. I'm like, wait, what do you mean, like a chef for the kids? You have, what kids need a chef? But some things you you're just, there's always the driver to get them back and forth to set. And when we're on locations, I paid you a relocation fee, so you're a local, so drive here, here's the map to get to set, drive here. And um sometimes they're uncomfortable conversations, but in the end, also sometimes if they're not too far gone into Hollywood in their own glory, uh they'll realize, oh yeah, that sounds kind of like douchey to be asking for that. Certain kinds of foods, if you're not a vegan with a dietary issue, bring your own stuff. Usually we've been switching a lot to vegan food on a lot of the recent shows, and it's great, and a lot of the crew loves them. But one actor we had, I don't know, they're lactose intolerant, gluten stuff. And, we had a chef on set for that person who would, not on set, they would make the food offset, bring them lunch, dinner, what have you. And I was like, okay, this is a little luxurious. Like, how do you survive outside of the movie world without this private person dealing with all this stuff? Sorry, I get off beat. It's just like I'm thinking back on all the things that the people have asked for, including, when we worked together, the request for the nurse to come to set every other day for whatever that they were needing. And at a certain point, actually on that show, we were working with someone from the studio or the channel, I can't remember, and he, it was a great little moment for me, because we were filming at that mansion in Malibu, and it had gone really long, and the director was a little, it was just too much. It was a party scene, it was just too much. And I was sitting out on the balcony, I was talking with this exec, and the actress, not to name names, but this lovely European actress, and I could see you smiling, came up, and she was like, she was talking to the exec. She's like, did you see where they parked my trailer? Did you see where they parked my trailer? It's like, I shouldn't have to walk this far to my one banger trailer or whatever we had gotten her. I shouldn't have to. Do you think I should have had to walk that far? And he's like, hey, I'm having a conversation here with Joe right now. I don't care where your trailer is. We're behind. Go in there and go hit your mark, okay? Go in there. And I was like, but she immediately, oh, 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 okay, and went in to do her job. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of people realize, oh, I'm here, I'm being paid, whatever I'm being paid, I should go do my job. It's you got to really balance when you do that, because it could go south very quickly. Another time I was meeting with, I had the UPM in the office, and we were going over something with the show right before the show started. And the director, who just felt super entitled, came in and to ask about his car that we rented. Now, this is the third car we had gotten this person, and it was like a G5 or something. It was nice, but he wanted some other change, and he goes, yeah, I mean, do you think I should? He just came in, he's like, hey, do you think I'm very, it's just not working, I'm just not comfortable with this car. And literally before I said, F out of my office right now, you're driving me insane, the UPM had come to a breaking point and goes, hey, we're working here right now. You can't just come in here and interrupt. We're working. And he's like, it's like it's like sometimes there's a different world that people are operating on, and you just have to pull them back and like shake it out of them. Look at where we are and look at like kind of the realities of the day, because we're in a business,
Right.
and you've been paid X amount of dollars to do your job. And asking me again about your third car you're renting because you're not comfortable with the first two is just getting stupid. So again, you really got to monitor when you do that and how you do that. But you'll find if you're dealing with professionals, they will go and toe the same line you're towing to get the job done. So I don't know if that's a very
Oh no, I think
roundabout
it's
way
very, because what you're doing, and you're saying it the right way. You're saying, and we find this a lot as producers. There is a balancing act between how much babysitting do we do with this A-level actor, how much do we do to make him feel comfortable, but where do we draw the line? Because now the A-level actor behaves like a 3-year-old out of preschool.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I find the same balance with you, where when you say you have to watch when you do it and how you do it. And I find myself thinking about these moments all the way back and saying, first of all, I'm German, I come across harsh anyway, even when I open my mouth, just because of the accent. So that sometimes helps and could also be not helpful. But I
Sure.
think what I'm finding, and I had to learn over the years, remember when we did timeshare, that the first thing I had to deal with is Timothy Dalton coming up to me and saying, my knees are touching the front of the seat. I thought he was making a joke. He was not making a joke. And it became very serious very fast, because I basically just said on that first day, are you insane? What are you asking me for? And I was so stressed out that morning because it was my first day on that set. And I said it in a way that I shouldn't have said it. And he got pissed at me immediately, and I could not repair this
Yeah, you can't. Yeah.
relationship for the entire shoot. So I have to say, me being direct at that time was not a good idea. And the way I said it was wrong. I should have said the same thing in a better, different way. Of course, it was a stupid comment to make, but I also had to learn as a producer to find that balance. When do I stop them when they're asking for too much? And how much do I give them so they feel good about being here with me, and maybe giving me the extra things that I'm going to be asking for next week when I have to have them on scene for 2 hours longer or on set for 2 hours longer. So that is a balancing act. So that's
Yeah.
absolutely true. We're getting to the
Yeah.
end here. The one thing I want to talk to you about a little bit is number of locations. You mentioned you work on television, which I think is even more strenuous when it comes to saving money. Talk a little bit
Sure.
about what we should do with locations, how we should handle locations for television specifically, maybe. What are some of the tricks of the trades you can share in regards to saving money?
Well, in terms of TV, I'm sure you're familiar with block shooting, where you're kind of combining, and I really advise that for efficiencies and for finance. It's just, when you're block shooting, you're shooting multiple episodes at one time. So usually one director will do 2 episodes. I have done 3 episodes in a block, which is a little more problematic, but as long as you have the scripts ahead of time, it usually works out. And what that gives you is that, for over these 2 episodes, we're in this this one kind of cool location. So you can shoot everything from 2 episodes in this location. So you're there for 3 days straight instead of, if you're shooting linearly with TV, you're in this cool location this day. So we prep it, we shoot it, we wrap it. And then the next episode, we're doing the same thing all over again. And so you're basically saving a prep and a wrap period in that time. And again, it goes back to my thing about as soon as you cut and you have to move to a new set, you have to break everything down. Everybody has to take the chairs, put them in the rack. You got to shut down the lights. You got to move the cabling. It's a, half hour, 45 hour between setups. And so when you block shoot and you're shooting all the scenes in this one location at one time, you're just losing all of that, all that logistic in between time. So you shoot more. So whatever you can do to keep the camera rolling, that's the best, because that will, kill some of your page count for the day. And I'm not trying to take the art or creative out of it at all. It just, if you give the creative more time to shoot, the more material you have, the more choices you have, the better editing you have. So my goal is always to give the most time to the scene, and the most time to the scenes, and block shooting is great for that in television. I really find the efficiencies. The directors can all get around it. I mean, it's a usual common concept now. Sometimes I know with more high-end shows, they like to shoot linear to give, star director or what have you, their time with just that. But everybody can usually wrap their head around block shooting, right. And it's it's the biggest game changer around. Right. Also with television, outside of me saying, condense the number of sets, condense the number of locations, it is shooting in a studio on stage versus going out on location. Going out, there's a danger of being too claustrophobic when you do that, and that's a real thing that you have to keep track of. But when you don't have to go out, or when you time your location work, so say you're shooting a half-hour show and you have like 10 days, 5 days each episode, and so you're shooting a block of 10 days, you keep all your location work in the 2 days at the top, and you try to condense that. So then when you get back to stage, you can drop your transpo. You can drop these drivers and you can drop this equipment, and you can just kind of live on stage in an isolated area. And obviously when shooting COVID, especially in the series that we shot right after COVID started, it's a real safety issue. So you don't necessarily want to be out in the world in the populace when you don't have to. You want to lock down your COVID bubble. You want to get you go through the testing, you're locked down. And then you only have to worry about what your crew and cast do outside of non-work hours. So it's a safety thing, and it's definitely an efficiency thing if you can kind of keep things more on set than going out on location. That's not to the detriment of creative, but if you can suggest that, that's usually a great saving tool.
And then in connection with that, we're talking about the amount of scenes and the amount of locations in general. So when you look at a script,
sure.
Let's say for a TV episode, what gives you a headache in regards to oh my god, these many scenes and these many locations? What would you say if kind of a good number of scene? Let's do a regular drama show, nothing crazy. What would you say is like the scene count and the location count you would balance around, like a range for a TV episode?
Just dealing with like a drama, it's always a little hard, but somewhere between 30 and 40 scenes, I think is probably a good kind of target. Right. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes just the breakdown of the script, you're like with a fight scene or a montage, you're not up in the 50s and 60s. But somewhere around 30 or 40 for a drama. And again, you're in that scene. I want to see multiple scenes in the living room, or I want to see multiple scenes in the conference room, just because you can kind of, schedule around and like scenes. If this scene is in a conference room, then, well, can we have some lawyer's office scenes as well? Because I know I can go to one downtown high-rise location and I can get all that stuff. That's another thing when you're scouting when you go on scouts for a conference room in a law office, keep your eyes open as you go up the building and around the building. There's a coffee shop right across the street from where we're going to base camp. Just keep it in the back of your mind in case you have a coffee shop, or in case, hey, you know what? I can suggest also getting out of the claustrophobic office environment and taking one of the lawyer meetings down at the coffee shop outside.
Great.
Very simple. I'm all set up. I don't have to move base camp. We're bringing the cameras down to at the end of the day anyway, so we'll just schedule some time to go across the street. But I'm always, even with stages,
Right.
when I walk around a stage, I'm like, okay, this is a nice brick facade on this side of the loading dock. So now I can have a warehouse. I can have a rave entrance. I can have, an underground, what have you, just at our stage. So what can I make out of, this opening lobby canopy that goes into my production office? What can I shoot there? You're kind of always thinking, oh, this could be this, and this could be that, and this could be this, and this could be that, as you're doing your scouts, as you're finding your stage, just so you know in the back of the head the things you could suggest easily that will help logistics and keep that downtime between shooting scenes to a minimum.
Correct.
So I'm always that's always running through my mind as I walk through sets and walk
So,
through location scouts.
so it is important to be open when you as a producer have the script in mind, and then you go to the location scout to just really have an open eye, looking around, what's there, what can I use to replace this, and this, and all keep it all confined as close as you can.
Sure.
Last
Yeah.
question we have is just, visual effects versus shooting it live, special effects. This is always a conversation where people say this is expensive, and sometimes people say, well, it's cheaper than to shoot it live. What thoughts do you have on these items?
Um, CG is getting so good that it's always a consideration. It always has to be in your discussion pool, one of your topics as you're looking at each scene. There is and maybe I'm alone in thinking this, I still love the practical setups better. There's just something with CG that you can start to see, even with like if you look at the Mandalorian, great. I mean, the use of the volume is fantastic. The worlds they can create, the camera matching with the background, it's fantastic. But there's a redundancy to that CGI after a while. If you're watching, you're like, okay, I feel I'm in a VFX world. I still feel I'm in a VFX world. There's something about the grit of reality that still comes off for me. You look at some of the practical stunt work done on the James Bond films, or that stuff really is visceral. Really. So there's the creative, the creative side of that. But I usually tend towards a blend of CGI and practical.
Mm-hmm.
In car chases, in fights, I usually think there's always probably the best solution is always usually a blend. Not dealing with like this, I've done a lot of supernatural stuff like creatures. There's always a question over, should we build it or should we just make it CG? At that point, if they're fantastical creatures, usually I'm saying just make it a CG creature. I've done the thing with the suit and the sculpting, and the artists are fantastic, what they can do. And even with animatronics and moving, jowls back and eyelids and hair and all these things, it's fantastic. But for speed, CG creatures are usually the way to go. And, it's just, you're already in a realm of fantasy when you're watching it. And as an audience member, you're allowing for that. So, CG creatures, I just kind of fall back on CG creatures now. And usually we did a lot of sculpting and molding and face plastering to get facial things, but CG creatures I kind of just do that now, but for the other things it's usually a mixture. I know you're asking kind of when do you kind of
When you
go to one or
decide,
go to the
right?
other.
Correct.
Yeah, it's always a product of the script and kind of the creative and how much money do you have to deal with
Right.
it. But
Correct.
usually with visual effects, it just saves you time on the day. Might not save you money on the back end, but usually saves you time on the day, and that's where your dollars are at their biggest value. When you're shooting, you have your crew out there, and you have 150 people, and your clock is at its most expensive as it will always be. So if you have to pay a little for 10 visual effects people to be working on your shot down the road, it's probably a little cheaper than clocking in at 150 people going into golden time.
Exactly.
So it's usually it's a great tool for movie makers and TV makers now, having a great visual effects department, supervisors, and they're out there. So, and
Yeah.
it's getting ubiquitous. Like you can do a hell of a lot of stuff on your Mac. So as we've seen from various student projects to just indie filmmakers, you can do a lot of
Correct.
stuff on your own computer now.
And talking about doing a mix, when I did the Halle Berry movie, she was eaten by sharks, and obviously we couldn't have A, sharks show up on cue, and B, have her eaten by real sharks. So we did animatronics. We built an animatronic shark, and we did a lot of underwater shop, and that thing never worked. So there is another technical component. We had the animatronic shark that we built, and we put it in the water, and it was always like, it's not working, the fin is not working, it looks
Yeah,
sick,
yeah,
and it was
yeah.
the whole thing. I mean, we got it done. So we did then add visual effects. We had to do visual effects anyway for the
Sure.
accident scenes, but it was interesting to see, and that was the first time I was faced with this kind of issue because I'd never done CGI with animatronics in combination. And
Right.
both have its minus and pluses. And we had the visual effect company working on the assets for the sharks, and then they got delayed, and our post production schedule got delayed. So then there was one company who got angry. So there's always that. So there are things to know about when you work with visual effect companies to make sure that they have a schedule that they can actually adhere to.
Sure.
They go over, maybe you make them pay because they go over. I mean, this is the kind of solution that I had to come up with after this. So you'll face things no matter what. Sometimes you cannot do it any other way. You have to for a shark movie. You have to figure
Right.
it out. If you do a visual
Did
effect,
Did you not watch the Jaws documentary on that animatronic shark before you did it?
I didn't have a choice. I had to make the movie. It has all the bad things. It has CGI. It has we were on the water. It had
Water
in
work.
South
Ugh.
Africa. We had water, South Africa, sharks, and A-level actors. I had it all. Trust me, I had it all. This was a big learning curve, for lack of a better word. But I don't want to take too much of your time. I just wanted to share, what can happen
Yeah.
in both ways that could be good and go bad. But
Sure.
for the last thing, I wanted to ask you for these students that we have, what kind of advice would you personally give them as they expand their career, as they embark on their career that you think is something useful for them to know? Just like a last piece of advice.
Well, the best thing, there's different paths to being a producer or being a director or what have you. There's a ton of different paths to get to that. I like working with the people who have the practical experience behind them and who have grinded on a 14, 16-hour day on some shoots, who have come up the ranks and worked in a variety of departments. So they have some empathy for how other departments work, and they know how the mechanics work for how Transpo interacts with the location department, how they interact with the city, how permitting works, how grip and electrics gel, how the camera department gels with, electrics and grips. It's on a practical sense, because I come from a kind of a nuts and bolts background, having that and having not just come out of film school and said, oh, I have to start paying back my tuition. So can I have my director job? Like, I've had friends that have come out of film school and said, oh, do you have like some directing for me? I'm like, no, you can be a PA. You can go get crafty. You can't just be this thing. I love that your short won its award at the Student Film Festival, but yeah, go grab coffee. There is and I think when you have a humbleness from that kind of background, you don't act like an ass and make these certain requests that we've all, you and I have both stomached over the years. You have a kind of more realistic playing field, and you're working with professionals because they know what it takes to get it done, because they've had to do that thing. That's and I'm just advising this because if I ever work with any of the students here, I just want them to have that kind of background.
Yes, exactly.
So I'm manipulating right now.
Yeah, you
And
are.
that's actually another thing that a producer does all the time is this, you're trying to operate the puppet strings on a variety of different personalities all the time. So
Yeah, I feel with you. I tell my students when they ask me how do I start my career path, I always tell them start from the bottom, because you learn so much by doing it all that it will be so beneficial at the time you are the puppet master, to use your words,
sure.
because you know what everyone has to do, and you know how you can manipulate a situation, especially also from a cost point of view. You know where you can save money because you've done that. You've
Sure.
seen it up close. So in a time where we are today, where we have to make these feasible budgets work and we have to save money so much, we didn't have to do that in the 80s and 90s and even the beginning 2000s. Now it's all like, what, you want $20 million for a movie? It's not happening unless you do
Yeah.
this, and the list gets longer and it becomes unrealistic. So for all of us, this interview was hugely helpful, Joe, and I really again appreciate you taking
Oh,
the time for doing this and taking the time out of, I know your busy day, you have to go now work on the project you mentioned, so I'm gonna make it short
yes.
and cut you off. And thank you again for being here this morning.
No worries. I wish everybody well, and wish everybody happy holidays, and good luck with all of it.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay.
Bye.
Be well. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.